today we're going to be talking about strategies and tactics for improving employer engagement. I'm a big proponent of the chat box. Please put your questions, your comments, anything that you'd like to have our panel address or for us to address in the chat box as we proceed through the conversation that we're going to be having today. We are very fortunate to have Dana Inman, who's the president and CEO of Atlanta Center for Self-Sufficiency, and also the chair of our Max Provider Council, emceeing for us today. So with this brief welcome that I'm going to give you here, excited to have you here. And Dana, I'm going to pitch it to you, and let's jump into this very ambitious, packed agenda. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. We have a very packed agenda today, so we definitely are going to get started. This is our first time hosting the Academy virtually, so we hope that the format and the content works, but definitely are looking forward to feedback from you all to make sure that this will work going forward as we all get used to this new reality of our lives being virtual in all spaces. So we do have a jam-packed kind of agenda planned for you. We have two presenters. I'm going to briefly introduce the two presenters and then have them kick us off. We're going to have a couple of mini sessions throughout this afternoon, some time for questions and answers, and then some breakout sessions as well, because we want to make sure this is interactive for everyone as we are doing this virtually. As John said, this is a professional development for ourselves, for our staff, for our communities, and so we definitely want to make sure people are getting the content and the information that you need. So we have two great presenters that are going to share with us today. The first one is Adam Forrand. He is a Vice President of Education, Talent, and Leadership for Gwinnett Chamber and Partnership Gwinnett. And then also Howard Arden, who's Talent Acquisition Specialist for Novo Health Services. He was previously with Jewish Career and Family Services, so he has the experience of the provider side as well. So really excited to hear what both of them have to share with us today. Before we get started, we're going to do a brief poll just to get a sense of who's in the room. So I'm going to launch the first poll, and hopefully those of you that are on the call will participate with us. So we'll give you a few minutes to vote. The first question is just what sector do you represent in the workforce ecosystem? We're halfway there. Give folks a few more minutes to vote or to log your question in, your answer in. Looks like we're heavy with education, local workforce providers, government. Excellent. Okay. All right. Next question, for those of you who are still with us, is how long have you been in the sector? A lot of longevity, 10 years or more, is already at 50%. It's great to hear.
I think we should have had a since dirt section, Dana, on that one.
Right. I didn't want to call those of us who've been there for longer than that call us out any more than we have to be, but yeah. So we're about 56%, 10 years or more. Only 6% less than a year. So not a lot of new folks to the in the sector joining us, but we do have some diversity here as well. And last question, just for fun. How many days did you eat Thanksgiving leftovers this year? Anybody still eating them?
I'm actually eating mine right now. That's why I have my camera off, Dana.
There's actually quite a few folks that are still with you on that.
Great.
Okay, so only 28% only ate it one day, and everyone else of us is still kind of eating off of it. So that was just a little bit of fun for us to get a sense again of who was in the room. So thank you all for participating in the polls. I am going to now kick it off the session and hand it over to Adam to talk about employer needs and helping us to better understand what employer needs are. As John said, if you have questions during the presentations, please use the chat feature, and we will get to the chat feature. We'll be monitoring that throughout the sessions and get to your questions as quickly as we can. So thank you for joining us today, and I will hand it over to Adam.
Awesome. Thank you, Dana. Thank you, John, and thank you, Joy. And thank you to all of you that are spending time, whether you're eating lunch now, like John is, or perhaps this is post-lunch for you. I'm honored to be here, particularly given the level of experience that is present today at this time. So a little bit about myself as I go to share my screen. I have been with the Gwinnett Chamber of Commerce and Partnership Gwinnett, which is the economic and development initiative of the Chamber of Commerce, for 5 years now. And over that 5 years, I've been focusing my time on 5 particular sectors that our economic development team is focused on. They are IT, health sciences, health services, manufacturing, advanced manufacturing more specifically, supply chain, logistics, and what we call corporate and professional services. So over the 5 years, I've been a part of the business recruitment team, making sure that those new employers feel fully immersed in the local workforce system, also while working through with our K-20 educational systems to make sure that we have alignment in our pipeline of talent. Now with the Chamber of Commerce, I'm focused on talent retention as well, which further expands that understanding of that perspective of our role as an intermediary when it comes to talent and workforce development. And so a big shout out to my colleague, Jordan McIntosh, who supports me and our project team and this community in making sure that our employers are fully engaged. And in saying that, the best way to describe the work that we do, when people ask how do we do what we do and how is it different than what others do in workforce development, the analogy we use is that we are workforce and talent concierge. So we are not direct service providers. We do not necessarily provide staffing support or have a database of candidates. Our job is to ask really smart questions of our employers and make sure that they get connected to the resources and the supports that our community has to offer as efficiently and as effectively as possible. So while we're a bit of a relationship broker, that concierge title is probably best fitting given the nature of the work that we do. So personally, professionally, I'm a marketer, and I consider myself a marketer. My background prior to joining the economic development team here in Gwinnett County is as an agency work, working in creative side. But as a marketer, my challenge is to make sure that the opportunities, the messages go as far and as wide and as deep as they can. And so my time with you today is not necessarily to supplant the wisdom that's in the room. It's not necessarily to represent that of my employer per se, but think of it more as a peer. And the advice and perhaps perspective I can share with you this afternoon that perhaps might give you a different angle on practices you've already been doing that may help you better advance your relationship with employers that you work with. And in this particular case, starting off with understanding their needs. And so I'd like to share with you the 3 C's. As I was thinking about how best to engage the ideas that I had in my head, particularly the practices that I use on a daily basis, I wanted to give a good little handle to it. So I came up with the 3 C's. But the first thing to remember though, in all of this, everything that I'm going to share with you right now this afternoon is that it's about them. It's not necessarily about you. It's not necessarily about your organization. It's about how you can serve them. So keeping that in mind, these are some mindsets and practices about how you could be. And so when you think of the 3 C's, I'm thinking about how you could be. Number 1, be curious. Now, this may not be a natural state for you. There may be things that you are naturally attracted to, things that get your attention naturally and organically. And perhaps the business models or the practices of an employer may not necessarily make you perk up and ask questions like, wow, what's that all about? Or how'd that come to be? Or what is that? But if you can practice this curiosity and approaching your work with more curious questions, the better you will be, particularly as it comes to making true, authentic connections with employers. And so one thing that I do is make sure that I do my homework about that employer as much as I can glean from them in a reasonable amount of time, of course, about who they are, what they do, when do they do it, where do they do it, and more importantly, how do they do it? These are questions that run through my mind that perhaps their websites or their social media presence give me some indication of the who, what, when, where, why, and how. And you'll notice I did say why. We're going to talk about why a little later. But if you can be curious, that gives you a great advantage. And so I'm curious, how many of you out there recognize this building? So in your chat box, I'd like to do a little temperature check here. In your chat box, if you know the name of this company, put it in the chat box, and I'd love to see it. I'm going to hopefully take a look there. This may be another angle that you see as you may be going in and out of Gwinnett County. Let's see here. I wish I could see the chat box, but I can't. So I'm going to make the assumption that you guys are putting out some answers in there, thinking like, hey, I recognize that place. It's a big behemoth of a facility. And let's go here. Let's see. Here.
Someone said, Adam, the OFS site has been mentioned. Yes.
That's right. Correct. OFS. So the interesting story about OFS, just as a quick aside, is that this used to be the Western Electric plant. This was the start of industry in Gwinnett County in the late 70s, early 80s, and continues to evolve. And the work that they do there is significant, and its relationship and its importance to Gwinnett County is significant as well. I'll come back to that in just a minute. The next C to B is consultative. We all act as consultants in some way. But in this particular case, working with employers in a professional sense is putting on your consultant hat. And with the homework that you've done, with the questions that you have, even after doing those homework, as a consultant, what I've learned from consultants that I've served and consultants who have served me is that they ask really ignorant questions. It's like, didn't you do your homework? Don't you know this? But they still would answer the question. When you ask really ignorant questions, what allows you to is compare and contrast what you already have learned about them in your homework to the answers they give you. And while that interview, that conversation may only be one representative of that organization, the more you ask those ignorant questions of other people in that organization, you'll be able to understand what the difference is between what you know and perhaps the perspective and the insight of that other individual. So there's differences, there's deltas. You need to look for those differences to help you better understand what their needs are. So doing your homework, asking really ignorant questions, then leads to asking really smart questions, because what we're doing here is building a relationship. We're building a potential collaboration. We may be building a pipeline. Or in this case, in this image, OFS is building a brand new draw tower. And you may have seen the cranes up late last year and early into this year, and their expansion was significant in our community. And the reason why it was important was because it meant new jobs. It meant fantastic new jobs. But if you've ever seen fiber optic cable being drawn down multiple stories of a building, it's a phenomenal process. It's heat, it's light, it's glass, it's quartz, and it's an amazing process. And our manufacturers we're building, we're building together. So as a consultant, it's really important to take that approach, that you're curious. You need to consult because you don't necessarily know all the answers. And last but not least, the third C, if you will, is to be cultural. And this isn't necessarily ethnic culture, for example. This is about understanding the cultural norms within these organizations. Why? Because we're looking for alignment. We're looking for things that resonate between our organization and our values and the values and the culture of that business as well. So you're going to be a bit of a cultural business investigator, if you will. In doing so, you will be able to find out the why. And if you've ever heard a lot of people talk about the why, and it seems to be a question that comes up a lot, and I was like, why do we do that? And if you've ever had children, you've dealt with that before, like, why, mommy? Why, daddy? Why is the sky blue? Lots of why questions, but those why questions are perhaps the most important questions to ask. Why do you do it this way? Why is it that there's a higher attrition rate after 18 months than prior to in 6 to 8 months? Why? What do you think about that? And the reason why I say this, and I bring this up as culture is so important, because it reminds me of a phrase that it always stuck with me, and perhaps you've heard it in the business world, is that culture eats strategy for breakfast. And when you think about that, if you've never heard that before, it's a phenomenal phrase, because these businesses may have top management consulting companies giving them great strategy, but in the execution of it requires a strong culture in that execution. So culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the better we understand that culture as workforce partners, the better we can serve their needs. There's common ground there. And so as you think about this, there's a company in our community along the interstate that has some satellite dishes. You see them there, right at the 316 split. So if you're ever going up 85 North and take a right onto 316, you see it right there. Does anybody in the chat box know the name of this company? And Joy or Dana, if you see the right answer or you see an answer, there we go. I see a chat box coming up. Let me open that up. Yes. Should have known Chris Motor would know this. As much time as he spends in Gwinnett County. This is Viasat. And the reason why I'm bringing up Viasat is because what you may see of them is like, hey, all these satellite arrays. I used to think that they were like 11 Alive or a local CBS affiliate, or they were a broadcasting company. No, they are not a broadcasting company. They are a advanced communications provider. They do, in Gwinnett County, they do ground antennae that then connect to satellites that are launched into space. They're a phenomenal employer, but I bring them up because culturally, they are a phenomenal organization. So when you get to know these companies, and if you have the benefit of visiting with them and spending some time with them, look for indications that give you a sense that their culture is unique or different. And in this particular case, there should be something you see down in that corner that's like, hey, there's something different about this company. Yes, there's a tennis court in the middle of their complex. Their organization is outrageous. It's about innovation. It's not about egos and titles. It's about innovation, constant innovation. And they spend a lot of time there. In doing so, their culture allows them to attract talent unlike no other, including in their manufacturing space as well. So as a recap, those things that you can be when it comes to understanding their needs better. You can be curious. You can be consultative, and you can be cultural. And in being that, we can be better partners. So I'm going to transition to the next mini session, if that's okay with you guys. And that's about communicating with these same employers. So again, I will remind you that this is about them. It's not necessarily about us. And so in that communication process, here are some things that I think about when I try to communicate with employers. And they're a squirrely bunch. So much like the previous mini session, the C's, I'm going to move to the P's. And these are just practices for you to consider. So maybe that's a fourth P. I don't know. The fourth P is practice. And whether it's practicing those consultative curiosity and cultural assessments that you do when you're working with employers as you try to assess their needs. Here are 3 P's when we think about the communication. So, number 1, platforms. As Dana said, as John mentioned, we are dealing with new platforms, green screens where I couldn't find my virtual background. I thought, you know what? Okay, I'm going to be on Zoom. It's a good color. It's the holidays. I'll work with it. We're dealing with a lot of platforms now when it comes to communications. You can think of them as platforms. You can think of them as mediums. You can think of them as channels. Whether your employers use Slack or Basecamp and they invite you to join them on those platforms in which internal communication occurs. Whether they prefer to use text or they prefer a call on their cell phone or their office line. Whether it is these platforms like Zoom or Teams or GoToMeeting. We have some employers that we work with who are forbidden to use Zoom because of their security concerns. If you remember back a couple months ago when Zoom was being Zoom bombed and that was a thing, and like now people were like, hey, I can't be on that. You got to meet me on GoToMeeting. That's the important thing, is to meet them where they are in their communication preferences. So when it comes to those platforms, This image is not an image of a Gwinnett County government employer. I wish it was. It's a pretty cool place. Looks to work. But the image here that I'm trying to suggest here is that there are platforms, there's layers, there's levels. It's about visibility. It's about openness. It's about keeping a line open. So when you think about platforms and your communication styles, and perhaps it means we got to keep a lot of things open, new apps, new devices, and perhaps we're open and learning how to use new platforms, new channels, new mediums. Meet them where they are. And you'll be certainly probably much more efficient and maybe more effective, even though it doesn't feel like it. So when it comes to employer communication, the second P that I thought about was persistence. Companies will go dark. Employers will go dark. That individual that you thought you made a really good connection with, like a real, maybe even personal connection with, she's going to go dark. He's going to go dark. And it's going to feel like you've been ghosted. Totally been ghosted. But the fact of the matter is you need to persist. Why? Because if you truly believe you have something of value to offer them, and Howard's going to talk about that value proposition in a little bit, you need to persist. You absolutely need to persist. Because right now, it's existential times for businesses. Like this is the time in which they are struggling to figure out what's going on for the next quarter, let alone the strategic plan, the 3 to 5 year strategic plan. Like, let's just survive, or perhaps not even think about thriving. We just need to get through the next quarter. And that's difficult. And giving them the space and the grace and the time and know, like, okay, I feel like I've been ghosted, but I'm going to keep trying. Why? Because you believe you have something to offer of value. And persistence can beat resistance. It can. And this tree growing out of a rock on the side of a mountain is proof of that. That persistence can beat resistance. If you've ever played rock, paper, scissors, this image shows you how paper can beat rock. Paper absolutely can beat a rock. It also reminds me of a Japanese proverb that I learned some time ago, that money grows on the tree of persistence. And if you're an employer, particularly if you're a for-profit employer, this is what they think of as well. If not to exist, it's also to persist. So money grows on the tree of persistence. All right, and the last P is pace. This is something we talk about a lot at Partnership Gwinnett and the Gwinnett Chamber, is about pace and maintaining pace, whether it's a fast pace or slow pace. I'm here to tell you that the pace of business right now is like a roller coaster. There are high highs, there are low lows, there are twists, there are turns. It speeds up, it slows down. The pace of business is uneven, and it accelerates and it decelerates very quickly, which makes it difficult for us as partners to be able to maintain pace. So what I'm asking of you is that if you can match pace, do so. And so when an employer who you feel like ghosted you, or is like totally gone dark, and then they call you and you realize, all right, it's go time. You've got to be prepared to go with them, to keep up with them. And so this image, I think, says it best, really, is that if you train like a tortoise, be sure to race like the hare. And so these are difficult times for us as well, personally, professionally, for those in our family, for those that we relate to. It's difficult to find the energy and the reserves to do that, to maintain pace, or even to match pace for that matter. So, you know, if you can use an accelerant like this little guy has, strap a rocket to your back, whatever that tool may be, whatever it is that fuel is that gets you going, reach it, find it, use it to maintain pace. So that's the 3 Ps. So the 3 Ps that I hope you will practice: use the platforms to communicate most efficiently, meet them where they are, be persistent, because persistent beats resistance, it really does, and maintain pace. So thank you for your time today. Again, I'm honored. It's been a privilege and a pleasure to share my perspective with you guys as well. So I'll turn it back over to Dana, where I think we're going to talk about networking.
We are, and thank you, Adam, for that great content. I wrote down a few gems for myself that I definitely want to remember, along with the 3 Cs and the 3 Ps plus 1, because we still got the practice in there too. So it's kind of 4 Ps and the 3 Cs. as well as some other gems in there. So thank you so much for a great presentation and for sharing that information with us. And before we kick it off to Howard, what I want to do is spend a few minutes talking about networking. It's one of the things that we hear about as a strategy that we should all employ when we are trying to engage with employers or with other providers or partners. But it's not something that we all do very well. And so we wanted to have a few minutes to talk about what networking is and how you all see it playing out in terms of these relationships with employers and how we can do a better job of networking to get us to our end goal of creating those partnerships. So I want to encourage everybody, again, if you have questions about networking specifically or anything that you heard Adam say, definitely use the chat box and we'll monitor the chat box so we can ask the questions of the presenters. But I do have a few questions to get started, both for you and for Howard, Adam. First question is, we talk about networking, or we hear networking being described as a skill or a set of skills. If you do agree with that, and I'm assuming that you both do, how do people go about further developing those skills to be better at networking?
Well, I'd go back to the P of practice, right? You're going to be uncomfortable at first. It may be a new business environment. It may be a new sector or a new vertical that you've never operated in or familiar with. And just go in humbly, go in hungry, go in smart, and keep practicing. Howard, you're muted. Sorry.
Can you hear me? Am I back? Okay. All right, good. I think it's also very good when you're networking to realize that it's not always what you can get from a network. Sometimes you can be very comfortable just coming in, asking people about their business, learning a little bit more about their business, being a resource for other things other than what you're asking for. I'll meet people sometimes. When I was with Jewish Family and Career Services, we had so many different services that we offered that, yes, I ultimately wanted to find job opportunities for my people, but I also reminded them that we had a food service, that we had a vocational group. So you want to try to get your foot in the door and be a full-fledged provider and a full-fledged resource. And once you can get that resource, you'll feel a lot better. And I think, again, I think people struggle and fail with networking when they really focus on what I can get. And so they'll meet people, and the first thing they want to do is, what can I get? What can I get? Instead of what can I give you, or what kind of resource can I be for you? I think once you show yourself to be a good resource for others, the getting part will come naturally.
Great, thank you both for that information. Oftentimes we go to these large or small networking events, and we encounter 100 people in the room, and we're not really sure how to target who we want to target or how to find out, kind of as being curious, as Adam mentioned in the 3 C's, right? So are there things that we can do once we get in the door of those networking events to be more strategic about how to network effectively, but do it in a strategic way? So we're not passing out business cards to everybody in the room, but maybe we have a targeted list of people, or about the elevator pitch that people talk about. Are there things like that you all would recommend that we have in that arsenal as we are going into those large or small networking events?
Yeah, Dana, I'd say it's exactly that. That's the practice that I have, is if the guest list or the participant list is not made available to me, and the see who said yes button's not there, I'll ask the organizer, hey, send me a list of who's going to be in the room, their affiliation, maybe a title, whatever you feel comfortable sharing. And I'm going to use LinkedIn to my advantage and figure out, okay, here's a visual profile. Here's what they look like. It may have been a glamour shot or, a picture from 10 years ago, but at least I'll have a good understanding, and I'll understand where perhaps our networks overlap as well, and then seek that person out. So have a target list. And then ask around the room, hey, do you know who Howard Arden is? Because I really want to meet him. And chances are pretty good someone knows who Howard is, right? And they'll get you to him.
I totally agree with Adam. You really have to have a plan when you go networking. I think that's where people struggle sometimes. They don't have a plan. So if you can get an idea of who is going to be at the event beforehand, and you can do a little research on them. Let's say, for example, you have a nonprofit that works a lot with veterans, and you, through your research, found out that an organization caters to veterans. When you go to the networking event, you definitely want to make sure you talk to that particular individual. You have a group that maybe in your department that takes care of people who have vocational services. again, if you could find out ahead of time, those groups that do vocational services or have those kind of needs, that's very good in advance. So you want to, I mean, there's so many networks now that find communications. There's Google, there's the Atlanta Business Chronicle. So when you find out who's going to be there, do a little research, find out through the Atlanta Business Chronicle if that company is organizing or has a new division coming to town, what that new division is going to be providing. And you want to target your networking. I think the reason why people struggle with interviews is they don't prepare. I think the reason why people struggle with networking is they don't plan. You're not going to be as successful when you're networking just kind of going willy-nilly, as opposed to really having a plan. You have to plan who you want to approach and what you want to say to them at the networking event. And that'll make you actually feel a lot more comfortable.
I think that's definitely great advice from both of you all. And one thing I'll add as a follow-up question is, then do you recommend that providers or other organizations that are looking to engage with employers join these networking organizations or groups like the Chamber or or Max or other groups that kind of bring people together as a way to increase the opportunity to network? Or do you feel like it's okay to do it on your own and kind of the one-on-one relationship with employers versus the bigger networking events?
Well, I'll take this one. I think, and I'm going to give a tip of the hat to Adam, because when I worked for Jewish Family and Career Services, I joined the Dunwoody Chamber of Commerce, and that was really helpful for me because the people at the Dunwoody Chamber of Commerce made a very strong effort to introduce me to people. So I wasn't kind of just wandering around a room of 50, 60 people. The chamber person said, look, Howard, I'm going to introduce you to some people you need to meet. So it was much more effective. I think you're going to get a lot more mileage out of joining these organizations. Your SHRM, if you're in a human resources capacity, your Chamber of Commerce and other organizations like that. I definitely want to do it as a group as opposed to doing it necessarily just on your own.
And if you choose to go on your own, might I say that you stay targeted? Like if you know you have had success in advanced manufacturing, continue to seek out those manufacturers in that cluster, right? The clustering effect of sectors is significant in Metro Atlanta, across the region. So that clustering effect could be to your benefit, and ask for a referral, because that HR professional who used to be at one manufacturer, the more you get to know them, they may have served just right down the street and still have friends at that other plant. And so find that sweet spot for your organization, who you serve and how you serve them best, and take advantage of those relationships within those sectors.
Right. And last question for this session before we move on is, Adam, you referenced that we're in the middle of a pandemic that has changed the way that we all do business. How have networking efforts with employers changed as a result of the pandemic?
Well, they were very receptive early in the pandemic situation to Zoom calls, and I don't know if it was just out of available time or just desire to connect with those organizations who maybe have assistance as they were finding their way through the pandemic. Now they've been a little reticent. Now some of them are getting really busy, right? I mean, the distribution, supply chain, logistics, 3PLs, e-commerce, like our sweet spot in Gwinnett County in terms of manufacturing, supply chain, and distribution, they're harder to get because they're really busy. And so those folks in hospitality and tourism, those are the ones we're spending time with now. And so it's hard to keep up with the markets, right? And understand what's happening in your community. But if you sort of read the tea leaves on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis, you'll see where the opportunities are if you're just open to it.
And things have changed so much for me because a year and a half ago, I was on the provider side and working on strategies on what type of events I could go to on a networking basis. Now on the employer side, I receive several per week requests from a lot of providers I work with. I work with veterans groups, I work with vocational service groups, and they invite me to every event that they can. And they have a lot of virtual career fairs. The Goodwill actually had a career fair at a brand new location here in town. We went to it. It was, safe and the mask and everything else like that. But a lot of the providers I work with right now reach out to me online and provide me with a lot of virtual events, and not just career service events. They may invite me to an event discussing childcare. They might invite me to an event discussing other aspects of business other than just job seeking that they think might be helpful for me to learn about. So virtual has been the way to go, and it's worked real well for me.
Excellent. Thank you both for giving us some insight and tips on networking. We're going to keep the agenda going and switch to Howard to focus on what can we do to sell ourselves to employers. How do we create that value proposition? And how do we form those effective partnerships with employers? And so I'm going to pass it on to Howard.
Okay. First off, let me just give a brief introduction. Again, I used to work for Jewish Family and Career Services as the Career Services Manager for 3 years. About a year and a half ago, I transitioned over to actually one of my clients, Novo Health Services. We provide clean and sterile linen for hospitals. We have locations here in the Georgia area, Maryland, Ohio, about 7 or 8 states that we handle. I do recruiting specifically for Atlanta, Miami, Richmond, Virginia, and I help out recruiting in 6 other states. So I stay pretty busy, if you will. We're actually right now in the top 5 of companies that provide linen for hospitals in the country. So that's our business as a whole. So really want to talk about something that I think is critical. We can talk about networking, we can talk about employee relations and having a relationship with employers. What I'm going to talk to you about right now is something that if you don't do this, everything else is for naught. And that is making sure that in terms of your value, that you provide reliable, ready-to-work referrals. So anyone you're going to refer to the organization, to an employer, has to be someone that has checked their email addresses, make sure their telephone numbers are current and accurate. So we're going to go right down to the brass tacks. I know a lot of services right now, when you're working with your clients, you're helping them on creating their resume, you're helping them on how to interview. But I'm going to take it down to the very brass tacks because the market is such right now that this is an excellent opportunity for you as a provider to build a relationship with an employer. And the reason is we're having a hard time finding people. I mean, that's just the bottom line. We're having a real hard time finding good candidates for jobs. Getting job orders is not very hard. The hardest part about the opportunity is employers are struggling to find good, reliable people. The government just announced yesterday that they're going to possibly increase the unemployment benefits for people. So that's going to make it even harder to find people. So the door is wide open for you to come in with good candidates. So you want to make sure that, again, the soft skills are taken care of. When you're working with your clients, make sure that they understand that their email addresses and their telephone numbers on their resumes are accurate. I can't tell you how many times I'll receive a resume, I'll call the phone number, can't get through, or I'll email a person and that's not accurate. And then that might cost that person an opportunity. So you want to make sure that you're advising your clients to check their email addresses and do that regularly. Also, make sure that you follow up with your employer. If you are able to get an interview for one of your clients, follow up with the employer. Make sure that they know that you care and you're going to check with them to make sure that everything is going well with the interview that you just had. Joyce, if you can move to the next slide, that would be, we'll be caught up. There we go. You want to be reachable to your employer and your clients in the event that they need to contact you. There are a lot of things that you can control, and there's some things you can't control when it comes to your clients. But when it comes to your clients, make sure that you prepare them to be reachable, that when they're getting telephone interviews, that they take them in the right spot, that they show up for their interview. There's nothing worse than having a situation where you're presenting one of your clients to an employer for an interview and they don't show up. Unfortunately, at Jewish Family and Career Services, when we had that happen, we had to stop working with that candidate. We could not let that candidate affect the relationship we have with our employer because there are just so many other individuals that really could benefit by that relationship that we just couldn't do that. So it's going to be real important for you. Everything else we're talking about right now is real key, but if you don't provide good placeable people and you don't provide good customer service, really, again, all of it's for naught. So this is just something I think is really key. The other thing you want to do, when I was at the Jewish Family and Career Services, I really would focus with my employer partners and let them know that we were no or low cost. Right now, there's 2 things that are very important for an employer is the cost that they spend to try to find individuals, and the time that they spend. So right off the bat, when you're trying to establish a relationship with employers, whether you're making a warm call or especially a cold call, stress to them that your services don't come with any cost, that you're going to be provide candidates to them, and that's not going to cost them anything. That's going to catch their attention. What's going to hold their attention is, again, the kind of services that you provide for them to make sure that goes well. So let me give you an example. So right now I'm working with Goodwill. One of the jobs that we have at Jewish Family Novo is calling a offsite linen distributor. So we have people that work at, let's say, Grady Hospital. They distribute the clean linen to Grady. Right now, Goodwill has a environmental services training program. And when people graduate from that program, that's tailor-made for what we're looking for right now. So if you have any training programs that are, it could even be English as a second language. When I was with Jewish Family and Career Services, English as a second language was a course that they offered, and they had some employers that was a good benefit to them. So make sure you let your employers know about different training programs that you have for them as well. So the internships, training programs, anything that you have that you feel would be a good match for that employer, let them know. If you have an employer that you're already working with, ask them. When I worked with State Farm, just through conversation, I found out that they were making a real big effort to help individuals who were vocationally challenged and maybe on the spectrum. Well, Jewish Family and Career Services, we had a division that specifically worked with people who are in vocational needs. So I pitched that to State Farm, and we had more conversations with them about how we could work with how they could work with our agency as a whole, not just career services. So again, that was another area that we thought we added value to them. Then you want to make sure that you express that you're a full service operation. When I say full service, that means if you have other aspects of your providership that you can provide, you definitely want to let them know about that. So Northside Hospital, and again, State Farm was a client of mine. And what I would do is we had a food bank at Jewish Family and Career Services. I let them know about the food bank, and believe it or not, they had employees that they referred to me to come take advantage of our food bank. They had a person that recently relocated, I think it was State Farm, from another town. The individual had a few children, was living in a hotel, and we were able to help him as well. So again, most of the people who are on the call have various aspects in their in their business. Be full service. Let them know that they can call you for other things other than the career services aspect, and I think that will increase your value to them as well. So I'm going to actually now transition over to the forming employer-provider partnerships section of our conversation, if you will. So Joy, if you can go there, that would be great. I don't know if Shelley Miller, my former coworker at Jewish Family and Career Services, on the call today, but if she is, she would definitely justify and testify to this. One of the things I thought was extremely important for me at Jewish Family and Career Services was to visit my employers on a regular basis, whether it was someone that I just started doing business with or someone I had a continued relationship with. Visiting that employer is very important for a couple of reasons. Oh, good, Shelley's with us. Okay, good, Shelley. So one of the things that's very important is you want to go out and visit that employer to get an idea of their environment. You have clients you're working with right now. Certain clients might be a better match at certain employers than others. So going out there and getting a good idea of the environment that they're looking to send your clients to is very helpful. I've never had an employer tell me they didn't want me to come visit. They love it when you show some interest in their business. It shows that you are, that you care about their business. You actually want to be in a situation where they look at you as a key resource in their career services. State Farm, I keep dropping names, but State Farm is a huge organization, but I think we had gotten to the point where they felt we were a player for them. So every month they had a meeting where they were talking to people about State Farm, they were talking to job seekers, and I attended about 6 of those meetings. I wanted State Farm to know that I was as interested in their business and interested in forming a partnership with them as possible. And so that's what we had. As a matter of fact, If the days had worked differently, I would have had a State Farm representative to join us on the call today, but today they're involved in the job fair. State Farm, Northside Hospital, and CVS are companies that I worked with before that I'm still in contact with now, even though I'm on a very different basis. So make sure that you go visit your employers as much as possible. Even with the pandemic, I know it's a little difficult, but there are ways that if you can get out and see them, that's going to be real key for you. Joy, if you can go to the next slide, that would be great. You can create your own employer networking event. Now, this is a little bit more difficult now with the pandemic, but prior to the pandemic at Jewish Family and Career Services, we had an event at our campus where we invited employers to come and meet with some of our job seeker clients. That served two purposes. One, they met with our job seeker clients on a very casual basis. It wasn't like a job fair. The employers stood up and talked about what their businesses entailed and had a chance to meet with the job seekers afterwards. But strange enough, a lot of the employers bonded together. We had a healthcare organization. We had another organization that produced drones. You'll be surprised at the end of the day how those employers started interacting with each other. So again, with the pandemic now, maybe it's something you can do virtually. Maybe you can send out some messages and arrange some meetings with the employees that you do have right now, or the employees that you want to do business with. Maybe you can do it virtual. And again, it would be a chance for your employers to meet with your job seekers and your employers to meet with each other. So maybe that's something you can still do online as well. So those are just a few ideas that I think you might want to try in terms of creating stronger partnerships and showing your organization's value to each other. Again, right now I'm on a different side of the table, so I work with I've gotten to the point now where just to show you how I don't use job boards very often. I really rely upon the relationships I have with my providers to find people. Here in Atlanta, it's one thing. I started doing some recruiting in Richmond, Virginia, and Miami. Well, I didn't have contacts in those areas. So what did I do? I reached out to Goodwill in Miami and Richmond, Virginia. I reached out to other providers, nonprofits. If you're from a organization right now and you have locations outside of Atlanta, nothing wrong with talking to them and finding out what contacts they may have that might be in the Atlanta area. And what I mean by that is, when I was at JF and CS, our Boston location was phenomenal. They had 26 partner relationships. They had amazing programs. And I reached out to them and they were able to help me get a relationship going with people with CVS here in Atlanta. So, reach out to your partners in that regard. One of the things that Shelly and I did when I worked together with her at JF and CS is we reached out to our board members. So those of you who have board members, you might want to reach out to them to find out how they can maybe expose you to employers. If you're in an educational organization, reach out to your staff and see who they can introduce you to as well. Again, there are so many organizations that will give you jobs, but you must make sure that you provide excellent customer service and that you have excellent people for them as well. That's the key. If you take away nothing else from this conversation, make sure that your service and the people you provide that are your clients are of the highest level, because employers, one thing right now, money is important, but the most important thing also is time for us. And I know which providers I really want to work with and which ones that unfortunately haven't really come through as well as I like. So matter of fact, even before you start doing your networking and you're planning on going out and trying to get employers, make sure you know what product you're going to sell. You wouldn't sell a product if you didn't understand it or if you didn't fix the flaws in it first. So before you go out there and really try to market your business and create a brand, you want to make sure that you have a good product to recommend. So I think that's the most important thing to do first.
So thank you once again, Howard, Adam, Dana, great job moderating. Joy, as always, thank you for driving the bus and keeping us all on track and putting it together. So we are fully launching, we kind of took a break during the pandemic with our Max Academy, but we're committed to doing quarterly Max Academy next year. First quarter is going to be, where the date is still TBD on that, but we'll have that coming out very soon. But from a topic perspective, we're going to talk all things IT career pathways. So we know that we have a lot of interest in the IT field. And then I also know from personal experience, when we start throwing around the word soup and the word jumble of certifications and pathways and what's stackable and what's not and what makes sense and what employers want, I get lost. So we're going to try to decipher all that world of IT career pathways. So stay tuned for the date for that to register. And we think that's going to be something very helpful from a professional development standpoint for the IT sector. But even more importantly, I just posted, and I'm going to hit send now, my email address. If you don't have it already, I'd love to find out what else you'd like to have on the table for next year. So please send me an email. Always use the form, reach out to Joy, multiple ways. It comes back. We talk a whole lot, this group of executive committee and the board, trying to meet the needs of our professional development, of our workforce development community of professionals and to be of true service. So there's going to be a lot going on in 2021 for Max. Your chair, Amy Lancaster, we call her boss lady, has been keeping us all busy and has been coming up with all kinds of ideas for what Max is going to be. And it's, I'll say, a 2.0 version. So more to come on that. So stay tuned. Hope you all have a wonderful holiday season. Take care of yourselves, stay safe, and thank you for participating today. Take care.